German Haus. You know, it's spelled H-A-U-S. Alright, we'll go this way. The Fab Five Live. This is, of course, the Kimmel Center, and it was being built when I started working in Philadelphia and moved here. It didn't open till like maybe a year and a half after I was already here. So comedy, and they've had Martin Short and Steve Martin. So that, if that's not confusing enough, right? Martin Short and Steve Martin. And Martin Short is physically short. They whited out the eyes on one of the figures on that banner of Go Big. I don't know what the banner is on the bus for on the side. Sort of an empty building from the University of the Arts, which had to close, although they have banners. I don't know if they're just not closing or taking the banners down or what the dealio is. But for their banners, they did wind up with a good green. You know how it's hard to find a good green color? And it's like, that's on the more perfect side of green, the more amenable green. So greens are one of those things where it's like, I want that perfect green. It's almost like a green M&M, like you're not too dark, not too light, not too yellow, not too this. I want a green shirt. And the Eagles aren't really that green, the perfect green. They have very specific, is it like a Kelly green? I don't know what the green is for. It's sort of, the traffic lights are in the realm of the green that people like on shirts. And anyway. So, little thing here. I thought about crossing the street at Pine Street, and I felt compelled to cross the street, and I wondered if anyone around that block was trying to, you know, with their special power. I know this sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but some people might have the ability to direct people a little bit in their mind. Like, they'll give the power of suggestion invisibly. So some people have all-out careers and jobs because someone piloted them there. They could be a judge, you know, and it's like they just sort of wound up there because someone else was at the helm invisibly, and they needed someone in there, a female maybe. And my goal today was to walk all the way down South Street, and then, Broad Street, and then turn down south. And I wanted basically to stay on this sign. I almost crossed over, and there used to be a Starbucks on the northeast corner of Pine and Broad, and that would have brought people across the street, you know, especially because at this point on Broad Street it doesn't start to look that great. You know, we have this, you know, junky building here. It used to be the Department of Health, Public Health, one of their buildings. I think they had two, but if you look close enough it wouldn't pass its own test, you know. Like, say the Department of Health entered a restaurant and had to cite them for violations. This building has always been like this, and it wouldn't have passed its own test for restaurants. The camera might not be able to pick up just how CRAPPY looks. It's really bad. It's like basically a rundown, disgusting building that you wouldn't necessarily want to work in. Then someone else I knew said, unless you're into natural intel, sort of like reading tea leaves, and like, say mold shows up or weird figures show up on the walls or whatever, and they would see it as like messages coming through, but there's a scientific side of the world, or quote-unquote logical, that would say, isn't that like schizophrenia? No, people actually read, it's like reading tea leaves. You know, they might look at the salt on the ground and be like, oh my god, it looks like a cow, you know, and they would know something's going on that is in the world of bovine or cattle or cow. So it's helpful to know that stuff in advance. So for some reason, I don't know how it works, you know, I'm just told this kind of stuff, and it's like, really? Because I would be afraid to sound like a schizophrenic. Arts Bank, which is with a T. They turned it into a T after all, but it used to be like an apostrophe. So AI ban is what I get off of that, you know, because they darkened out the light. Somehow, nature or man blotted out the lights that would create the word arts bank. So AI ban is what. And see, like Mother Nature, the natural world, would want to ban AI at this point because it got a little too salacious, a little too confusing, a little too mind scrambling. And that's why people took to reading other things in life, I guess. So say you're completely normal and this happened yesterday. Say you run into Trader Joe's for some water. And this guy's having like a pretty cool conversation and you're like, oh, he seems pretty. All of a sudden you say one thing like, oh, for instance, he said he was from San Francisco. I don't know if he really was, because then he started talking about Brooklyn. I was almost certain he wasn't from Philly. It's like a thing you can kind of tell, Philly radar, you know. And there's a lot of transient people in Trader Joe's, you know, in major cities. So, and I kind of joked, I'm like, you know, that's interesting, because he knew about reload bags and bike messenger bags, you know, chrome bags. And I was like, you know, it seems like San Francisco or the West Coast is like 30 years ahead of the East Coast. The East Coast is always catching up. For instance, they've had yoga for eons. That yoga peaked ages ago on the West Coast. But it didn't peak here, at least in Philadelphia and even New York, until the 2000s. There really wasn't a major, beautiful movement or scene for yoga until the new millennium. Yoga was already a big scene on the West Coast. The same with like LGBT community, clothing, it's like a wave, someone would say. So a lot of things sort of are hatched on the West Coast and then it finally waves over to the East Coast. Even though we have major cities here, you know what I mean? But by the time we pick up on it and old school people can sort of adopt it into their world, that's like 30 years later. So in the West, people would say, you know, pioneering, go west, young man. And people who are progressive and new and pioneering wind up on the West Coast is what they would say in the past anyway. So I said that, and quickly, as soon as I said San Francisco is like 30 years ahead of the East Coast, the cashier guy, who seemed totally awesome, he started talking, it's not like tongues, but it's like, I have no clue what that guy just said. And it's not because he's talking quickly or fast, it's because he just scrambled in a whole bunch of things that don't go together between Brooklyn, California, and like 6 other things. And I was like, that made no sense whatsoever. It's not even like if you slowed it down you could understand what he meant. No. So I just went along like, oh yeah, that's cool, you know. You know. So it happens. Like, I've even been confused by, you know, say clients or certain people I've communicated with, and I'm like, that's what? I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty clear. And I